Now, students, I want to talk with you about quote number 6. We are in quarter 2, week 1, and we're now on quote number 6. Quote 6 says, "For the purposes of action, nothing is more useful than narrowness of thought combined with energy of will." And this quote is written by Henry Frederick Emile. Henry Frederick Emile was born in 1821 and he died in 1881. He is probably best known today for the quotes he wrote during his lifetime. Another one of his famous quotes is, "To know how to suggest is the art of teaching." Emile was born and died in Switzerland, and he was also a professor of philosophy, but he felt as though he were a failure. He never felt like he quite measured up to his own expectations. He escaped his life and his feelings of failure by writing in his journal. From 1847 until his death in 1881, he wrote about his thoughts and the struggles of all people. His journal was then later published in several parts, and his writings actually show a man of great intelligence and great insight. And he's still very well known today for his bits of wisdom. In actuality, Emile was not a failure. He was a great success. He was extremely intelligent. He set high goals and he actually achieved and accomplished those goals. But to him, he always felt like he just didn't quite do enough. He didn't quite succeed well enough, and he didn't quite measure up. But in the eyes of the world, he actually did. I want to go back now to the quote, and I would like for us to break it down and take a look at it. Okay, quote 6, let me say it again for you. "For the purposes of action, nothing is more useful than narrowness of thought combined with energy of will." Basically, what Emile is saying in this quote is, if a person wants to accomplish something, then he has to keep his mind on what he's doing. And the person has to use all of his energy in order to get the job done. You know, nothing is more useful than the purposes of action. You set your mind to something, you narrow your mind, you narrow your energies to what you have determined in your mind that you would like to accomplish, and you will be successful and you will accomplish. I want us to take a look at this quote. Did you notice? I'm going to read it again. Listen carefully. "For the purposes of action, nothing is more useful than narrowness of thought combined with energy of will." Did you notice there are no pauses? There are no commas. We tend to want to read this with commas. "For the purposes of action, nothing is more useful than narrowness of thought combined with energy of will." However, there are no commas, so those pauses that I just implemented should not be there. Here's a general rule that I would like for you to remember regarding prepositional phrases and commas. We tend to think that every single time a sentence begins with a prepositional phrase, it must have a comma. That is not true. Normally, if a sentence begins with a prepositional phrase, but the prepositional phrase is really short, then no comma is needed. Now, if the phrase were really lengthy, if it were a really long phrase, then yes, you would need a comma at the beginning, at the end of the prep phrase. But because it's a short prep phrase, and in fact, we have 2 short prep phrases at the very beginning for the purposes of action. So you would not need commas at the beginning of this sentence for that reason, because the prep phrases are very short. Okay, so that is the lecture and discussion over quote 6 by Henry Frederick Emile.